The sharp crack of the gavel was the sound of my life shattering. On the charge of embezzlement, this court finds you, Miss Elena Torres, guilty. Judge Harrison's voice boomed, a detached final thunder rolling across the silent courtroom. I sentence you to 5 years in the state penitentiary. 5 years. The words echoed in the cavernous space, each one a hammer blow against my skull. My gaze, however, wasn't on the judge. It was locked on Marcus, my fiancé, the man I had loved and trusted for 6 years. He didn't look away. He stood there, a mask of feigned solemnity for the jury, but his eyes held a triumphant, satisfied smirk that burned itself into my memory. It was an image I knew I would carry with me into the darkness of a prison cell, a brand hotter than any physical searing. The bailiff stepped forward, his movements practiced and impersonal. The cold, metallic bite of the handcuffs as they snapped around my wrists was a stark, brutal confirmation of the verdict. My world had narrowed to the glint in Marcus's eyes and the chilling weight on my arms. "All rise," the bailiff grunted, his hand on my elbow, pulling me to my feet. As he led me past the prosecution's table, a familiar scent wafted from Marcus's suit jacket, a scent I had smelled on him just that morning. Jasmine, Victoria's signature perfume. It clung to his expensive collar like a stain, a fragrant ghost of their rendezvous, the final, mocking confirmation of his betrayal. He hadn't even had the decency to change his suit after leaving her bed to come to court and watch me be sentenced for a crime they committed together. He was sending me to prison for her. The thought wasn't a question. It was a certainty, as solid and cold as the steel now binding my hands. He had chosen her, his beautiful, reckless, grasping mistress, and I was the sacrifice laid upon the altar of their greed. He had condemned me to protect her, to hide the truth of her thefts under the wreckage of my life. "Marcus," I whispered, the name a curse on my tongue, but he just gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a final, silent dismissal. My stomach plummeted, a free fall in a severed elevator car. The initial shock, the hot, stinging tears that had threatened to spill, vanished. In their place was something else began to form in the pit of my gut, a feeling so cold and hard it felt like it could cut glass. It was rage, pure and absolute, crystallizing into a diamond-hard resolve. They thought they had won. They thought they had buried me under a mountain of falsified evidence and legal jargon. They had taken my career, my reputation, my freedom. But as the bailiff guided me toward the side door, I knew they hadn't taken everything. They had left me with a purpose, a single, burning focus that would light my way through the next 5 years or however long it took. I would not just survive. I would find a way to make them pay. The gears of my mind, once frozen in horror, began to turn, calculating, searching, clawing for a way out. "You have until 5 o'clock tomorrow evening to file a notice of appeal, Miss Torres," my now useless public defender mumbled as he gathered his papers, already mentally moving on to his next lost cause. The words sliced through my burgeoning anger with a blade of pure panic. 24 hours. A single day until the appeals deadline expired forever, sealing my fate and cementing Marcus's victory. The clock wasn't just ticking, it was a bomb counting down to my final annihilation. My breath caught in my throat. Hope, which had just begun to flicker, was nearly extinguished by the impossible timeline. How could I do anything from a holding cell? How could I fight a man with infinite resources and no conscience when I had nothing and no one? The heavy door loomed before me, the point of no return. My eyes darted frantically across the gallery, a last desperate search for a lifeline in a sea of indifferent faces. And then I saw him, Ryan Blackwood. He was sitting in the back row, his expression unreadable, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the grim surroundings. Marcus's greatest business rival, the one man in the city Marcus truly feared. He wasn't here by accident. Our eyes met across the crowded room, a silent, instantaneous connection. In that fleeting second, a plan, wild and desperate, ignited in my mind. The shockwave of the verdict had thrown all the pieces of my life into the air, but in that moment of shared gaze, they began to fall into a new and dangerous pattern. Ryan Blackwood, the enemy of my enemy, had just become my only hope. I held his stare as the bailiff pulled me through the door, my resolve hardening from a promise to a certainty. This was not the end. The holding cell was a box of concrete and despair, smelling of stale sweat and disinfectant. They had taken my suit, my shoes, my jewelry, and my name, replacing them with a rough orange jumpsuit and a number. I was no longer Elena Torres, successful executive. I was inmate 734. The fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous, soul-crushing tune. For an hour, I sat on the cold steel bench, letting the reality of my situation wash over me, each wave threatening to pull me under. But with every crest of panic, the image of Marcus's smirk and the scent of Victoria's perfume pulled me back, my rage a life raft in the churning sea of hopelessness. I had one call. Everyone got one. Most called a lawyer, a mother, a husband. My target was far more strategic. I remembered the number from a confidential file Marcus had once left open on his desk. Ryan Blackwood's private, unlisted cellular. A number Marcus himself would use only in the direst of circumstances. I walked to the steel-enforced door and banged my fist against it. "Guard! I'm ready for my phone call." A weary-looking officer unlocked the slot and handed me the clunky black receiver. My fingers, slick with nervous sweat, fumbled as I punched in the memorized digits. It rang twice. A crisp, low voice answered. "Blackwood." There was no preamble, no wasted energy, just his name, hanging in the air like a challenge. I took a steadying breath. The fate of my entire future balanced on the next sentence. "Mr. Blackwood," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is Elena Torres. I have Marcus's dirty laundry, a whole trousseau's worth, and you have the resources to help me destroy him with it." There was a beat of calculated silence on the other end of the line, long enough for me to hear the frantic pounding of my own heart against my ribs. I could picture him in his high-rise office, staring out at the city Marcus so desperately wanted to own, weighing the odds. "Miss Torres?" he finally replied, his tone laced with a cool, dismissive skepticism that stung more than I expected. "I just watched a jury convict you of embezzling $200,000 from your fiancé. What on earth makes you think I'd trust a single word from a convicted felon?" His question was fair, the precise obstacle I had anticipated. This was my one shot to prove I was an asset, not a liability. "You'll trust me because you're smart enough to know a setup when you see one," I shot back, my voice dropping, sharpened by conviction. "And you know as well as I do that Marcus framed me. You'll trust me because the person he was protecting is Victoria Hastings." I let her name hang in the air between us. "You know he'd burn the world down to protect her. And you know her appetite for the finer things is expensive. The only thing the jury got wrong was the name of the thief. I was just the scapegoat." Another pause, shorter this time. I heard the soft click of a pen against a desk. He was listening. He was considering it. "You're right about one thing, Miss Torres," Ryan said, a new edge of interest in his voice. "I do know about Victoria's expensive habits. But you're thinking too small. This isn't about a new wardrobe or a sports car." He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Marcus didn't frame you over a simple case of corporate theft. He framed you to cover up the money he was siphoning to pay off Victoria's gambling debts." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Gambling? What are you talking about?" I whispered, leaning my forehead against the cold concrete wall. "The money wasn't from your company's accounts, Elena," he continued, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial register. "That was just the story he fabricated for the police, the lie he knew he could prove with the fake paper trail he created leading to you. The real money? The money Victoria lost, he embezzled from 3 different charities, one for pediatric cancer research, one for homeless veterans, and one for a children's arts foundation." A wave of nausea washed over me. It was so much worse, so much more monstrous than I could have ever imagined. Stealing from shareholders was one thing. Stealing from sick children was a level of evil that defied comprehension. My crime, the one I was now sentenced to 5 years for, was nothing more than an elaborate piece of misdirection. A magic trick to keep the world from looking at where the real crime was happening. "My God," I breathed, my rage now eclipsed by a profound, sickening disgust. Marcus wasn't just a cheat and a liar, he was a ghoul. How do you know all this? Ryan didn't hesitate. Because I make it my business to know everything about my competition. I've been tracking their financial bleed for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. Victoria's little problem is the kind of weakness that can bring down an empire. He was right, and I was the key to unlocking it. So, you'll help me? I asked, a sliver of genuine hope cutting through the despair. I can provide you with internal account structures, passwords, timelines, everything you need to prove it. Help you? Ryan's voice suddenly sharpened, snapping back to the present. Elena, the time for methodical planning is over. My people have the evidence, but it's not admissible without a sworn affidavit from someone on the inside. Someone like you. He paused. What time is it there? I glanced up at the large institutional clock on the wall opposite my cell. The thick black minute hand was moving with agonizing slowness toward the 6. It's 3:30, I said, my voice tight with confusion. Why? The line went quiet for a moment, and I heard the frantic clicking of a keyboard. Damn it! Ryan swore under his breath. The Court of Appeals closes at 5 o'clock sharp. That's when the window for filing your notice of appeal closes. Forever. The reality crashed down on me with the force of a tidal wave. We had 90 minutes. 90 minutes to get a sworn statement, file a legal motion, and stop the gears of the state from grinding me into dust. The fight wasn't days or weeks away. It was now. The 90 minutes that followed Ryan's call were a blur of controlled chaos. A man I'd never seen before, a sharp-suited lawyer with ice water in his veins, appeared at the bars of my cell less than 10 minutes later. Elena Torres, I'm Jonathan Pierce. I work for Ryan Blackwood. We're getting you out of here. He moved with an efficiency that was breathtaking. There was no discussion, no debate. He slapped a series of documents against the window for the guards, his voice a low, commanding hum of legal citations and procedural demands. A stay of sentence pending appeal filed electronically a minute ago. A bail bond posted for an obscene amount of money already approved. The guards who had looked at me with bored indifference an hour ago now scurried to comply, their faces a mixture of confusion and newfound respect for the power moving behind the scenes. Within 45 minutes, I was walking out of the precinct, the orange jumpsuit replaced by my own clothes, which felt foreign and strange against my skin. The sterile, hopeless air of the courthouse and its holding cells was sucked from my lungs, replaced by the cool evening air of the city. A black town car was waiting at the curb, its engine purring. Where are we going? I asked, sliding onto the plush leather seats. Jonathan handed me a sleek new phone. The office, Mr. Blackwood is waiting. As the car pulled away, I glanced back at the courthouse, a monolithic tomb where my life had been pronounced dead. But I hadn't been buried. I had been resurrected. Ryan Blackwood's office was less a workspace and more a command center, perched high atop the city in a skyscraper of glass and steel. The sterile chill of the courthouse gave way to a world of warm mahogany, the scent of rich leather and freshly brewed coffee replacing the lingering odor of disinfectant and fear. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire penthouse, offering a god's-eye view of the metropolis below. And there, directly across the plaza, was the courthouse I had just left. Ryan stood by the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, looking down at the very steps I had avoided. Just in time for the victory celebration, he said, his voice a low rumble. I came to stand beside him, my heart clenching into a tight, painful knot. There, on the courthouse steps, bathed in the flashbulbs of news cameras, was Marcus. He held a bottle of champagne aloft, popping the cork with a flourish. The spray rained down on a laughing, ecstatic Victoria, who clung to his arm like a designer accessory. They were kissing for the cameras, playing the part of the wronged man and his loyal partner, celebrating my demise. He's loving this, I said, my voice thick with venom. He's basking in it. Arrogance is a fatal flaw, Ryan noted, taking a slow sip from his glass. He believes he's won. He thinks you're a problem that has been solved and discarded. That gives us an advantage he can't even comprehend yet. As if summoned by Ryan's words, the new phone in my hand buzzed to life. It was a series of email alerts, one after another, a cascade of digital slaps in the face. Notice. Your personal savings account has been frozen by court order. Alert. Access to your investment portfolio has been restricted. Notification. Your credit cards have been suspended. Marcus wasn't just celebrating, he was methodically dismantling the last vestiges of my life, salting the earth to ensure nothing could ever grow there again. He was cutting me off from every penny I had ever earned, ensuring that even if I somehow managed to get out, I would be destitute and powerless. Then came a text message from a number I recognized as my original state-appointed lawyer. Elena, a severe conflict of interest has arisen. I can no longer represent you in any capacity. I am filing a motion to withdraw as counsel, effective immediately. He bribed my lawyer, I said aloud, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. And he froze all my assets. Ryan nodded, his expression unchanging. Of course he did. It's exactly his move. Predictable. He's closing all the doors, making sure you're trapped in the burning building. He looked from my face to the phone in my hand, then back to the celebratory scene below. A slow, cold smile touched his lips. He thinks he's in control. Shall we inform him otherwise? Ryan swiped his finger across his own phone, and a moment later, a speaker on his desk crackled to life. He was dialing. My breath caught in my chest. He was calling Marcus directly. It rang once, twice, before it was picked up. What? Marcus's voice was smug, impatient, and slick with champagne. He was clearly still in the middle of his party. Marcus, it's Ryan Blackwood, Ryan said, his voice impossibly calm, almost casual. I'm calling to congratulate you. There was a brief, confused silence. Congratulate me for what, Blackwood? Taking out the trash? Marcus sneered, and I flinched as if he had struck me. You think you're untouchable now, don't you? That was quite the performance on the courthouse steps. Elena is rotting where she belongs, Marcus spat. It's a good day for justice. Actually, Ryan said, pausing for dramatic effect as he met my eyes, she's standing right beside me. The silence that followed was profound. I could feel it stretching across the city, a tangible thing filled with shock and dawning horror. I could perfectly picture Marcus's face, the smug grin melting away, the color draining from his cheeks as he frantically looked around as if he might see us in the crowd. What did you say? Marcus finally stammered, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. I said, Ryan repeated coolly, you might want to check the news in about an hour. Your victory lap is about to be cut short. He was about to hang up when Marcus's voice, now a venomous hiss, came through the speaker. This isn't over, Blackwood. You have no idea what you've just done. Ryan smiled, a true predatory smile this time. He leaned closer to the phone, his voice a promise of ruin. No, Marcus, he said softly. It's just beginning. He ended the call, and the office was silent again, save for the distant sirens of the city below. The fear was gone. The disinfectant was gone. In their place was the scent of expensive coffee, rich leather, and the intoxicating aroma of revenge. The silence that followed Ryan's call to Marcus was thick with unspoken possibilities. The first blow had been struck, a clean, sharp jab that had wiped the smirk right off Marcus's face. But this was just the beginning. Ryan turned from the window, his expression all business. Jonathan, he said to the lawyer who had orchestrated my release, keep pressure on the district attorney's office. I want them to know we're appealing, and I want them to know we have new evidence that suggests a gross miscarriage of justice. Leak it to a friendly reporter if you have to. I want Marcus feeling the heat from every direction. Jonathan nodded, already typing on his tablet. I've got just the person at the Chronicle. Consider it done. Ryan then looked at me, his gaze intense. Elena, the appeal buys us time, but it's a defensive measure. I prefer to play offense. My forensic team is on their way up. I need you to tell them everything you know. Every project name, every special budget, every off-the-books account you ever got a glimpse of. Anything Marcus ever did that made you feel uneasy. We're not just looking for the money he used to pay Victoria's debts. We're looking for the entire rot at the core of his company. 10 minutes later, the office had transformed from a quiet sanctuary into a bustling war room. 2 more people joined us, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense haircut introduced as Sarah, Ryan's lead forensic accountant, and a young man with restless energy named Ben, his tech analyst. They didn't waste time with pleasantries, immediately setting up laptops and a large monitor that soon glowed with the complex architecture of Marcus's corporate servers. "He'll be trying to lock us out, burying everything," Ben said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "He's good, but I'm better." Sarah turned to me, a pen poised over a notepad. "Elena, Ryan says you were his fiancée and a senior VP. You were closer to him than anyone. Walk me through his process. When he wanted to hide something, what was his protocol?" For the next hour, I dredged up every memory, every fragment of suspicious behavior I had brushed aside in the name of love and trust. He had a slush fund for emerging market development, codenamed Project Icarus. It never had any real-world deliverables, I began. He had a separate server for his personal ventures, firewalled from the main corporate network. The access password protocol was always a variation of his mother's birthday and the name of his first pet. I supplied the details, the names, the dates. With each piece of information I provided, Ben would find a new digital key and Sarah would uncover another locked door. It was like watching master thieves crack an uncrackable safe, and I was handing them the blueprints. "I'm in," Ben announced suddenly, a triumphant grin on his face. He had bypassed the primary firewalls. On the large monitor, a complex web of folders and files appeared. It was the financial heart of Marcus's empire. Sarah took over, her eyes scanning lines of code and financial statements with incredible speed. "Standard embezzling playbook," she muttered, more to herself than to us. "He's routing small amounts through dozens of vendor accounts. The $200,000 he pinned on you was real, but it was just noise designed to be found." She pointed to a cluster of transactions. "He moved that money himself into an account under your name that he'd set up months ago. A perfect little package for the authorities." Seeing the clinical proof of his betrayal, so cleanly executed, sent a fresh wave of cold fury through me. "But this isn't the main event," Sarah continued, her voice quickening. "This is the sideshow, the real money. It isn't here." She brought up a global map and lines of data began to crisscross the screen. "He's washing the charity money through international accounts, Hong Kong, then Zurich, then—" Her voice trailed off as she followed the digital trail to its final destination. There it is. On the screen, a single destination glowed, the Cayman Islands, a shell corporation, registered under a ridiculously generic name. V&M Holdings, Victoria and Marcus. "How much?" Ryan asked, his voice low. Sarah's fingers danced on the keyboard, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. Her expression was a mixture of professional awe and disgust. "He's been doing this for 3 years," she said quietly. "Layering transactions, falsifying reports for the charity boards." My God. She finally looked up, her eyes wide. "It's not a few $100,000. He and Victoria have stolen $12 million. $12 million? The number seemed to suck all the air out of the room. $12 million meant for cancer patients, for homeless veterans, for children. My $200,000 frame-up wasn't just a cover-up. It was an insult. A piece of pocket lint he'd tossed aside to distract from the mountain of gold he was hoarding. The sheer scale of his depravity was almost incomprehensible. This wasn't just greed, it was a sociopathic void, a complete absence of morality. "Can you prove it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Can you tie him to it directly?" "I can do more than that," Sarah said, a grim smile on her face. She clicked her mouse and a scanned document filled the screen. It was the incorporation paperwork for V&M Holdings. "His signature is on the charter, and hers." She then pulled up wire transfer authorizations from the charities to the initial laundering accounts. "And his signature is on every single transfer authorization. He didn't delegate the dirty work, he did it himself." Ryan stared at the screen, his expression hard as granite. He turned to the rest of his team. "Package it. Every document, every transfer, every fake report. Create a file that a 5-year-old could understand. I want it ready in 1 hour." He then looked at me, a new plan already forming in his eyes. "The annual shareholder meeting for his company is tomorrow morning at 9. The pieces clicked into place in my mind. It was the perfect stage for his public execution. You're going to release it then, I stated, understanding his strategy completely. Ryan nodded. We give him two options. He can walk up to that podium tomorrow morning, confess to financial misconduct, resign as CEO, and promise to pay back the money. He'll spin it as a personal failing, a mistake he deeply regrets. He'll still face charges, but he might be able to control the narrative, save some small piece of his reputation. And if he doesn't? Jonathan the lawyer asked. If he doesn't, Ryan said, a predatory gleam in his eyes, then at precisely 9:15, as he's giving his triumphant opening address, every major news outlet in the country, every member of his board, and the SEC will receive a link to the file Sarah is preparing. The evidence will go live, and he'll be voted out as CEO by a board invoking the morals clause in his contract before he even finishes his speech. He will lose his position, his company, and his freedom all at once, in front of the entire world. It was a flawless trap. There was no escape. He was being offered a choice between a quick death and a slow, agonizingly public one. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been completely inverted. I walked over to the vast window, looking down at the city lights that twinkled like a sea of scattered diamonds. Hours ago, I was in a concrete box, stripped of my identity, my future a black hole of despair. I was a victim, a pawn to be sacrificed in a game I didn't even know I was playing. I thought justice meant clearing my name, proving my innocence, begging the world to believe me. I was wrong. The woman who had wept in that holding cell was gone, burned away by the righteous, cleansing fire of this new reality. Marcus and Victoria hadn't just stolen money. They had stolen from the most vulnerable. They hadn't just framed me. They had fundamentally misunderstood who I was. They thought I was a piece of fine china, easily shattered. They were about to find out I was forged steel. I turned back to face Ryan, who was watching me, a question in his eyes. He saw the change in me, the hardening of my resolve. He won't confess, I said, my voice cold and certain. His ego won't allow it. He'll fight. He'll walk onto that stage tomorrow thinking he can lie his way out of it. Ryan nodded slowly. I agree. A chilling, exhilarating sense of purpose washed over me. It was a feeling more powerful than fear, more satisfying than hope. It was certainty. I was no longer the victim begging for a shred of justice from a system that had failed me. I was an instrument of their downfall, a key player in their destruction. My gaze drifted back to the window, to the city Marcus thought he owned. I'm no longer the victim begging for justice. I'm the hunter with a loaded rifle, and tomorrow morning, the hunt begins. The next morning, I did not wake up in a prison cot. I woke up in a guest suite in Ryan's penthouse that was larger than my old apartment, the rising sun glinting off the city skyline. There was no orange jumpsuit. Instead, a charcoal gray power suit, tailored to perfection, was laid out for me. This was Ryan's strategy in action, not to hide, but to command the stage. The media narrative right now is convicted felon released on last-minute appeal. He had explained over coffee, his own suit immaculate. Today we change that narrative to whistleblower strikes back. Our destination was the downtown FBI field office. As our car pulled up, I saw them. A dozen photographers and a couple of news vans, all waiting. Ryan's team had leaked our location. This was a calculated performance. Every step I took from the car to the glass doors of the federal building was a declaration. The flashbulbs were a blinding, popping storm, and reporters shouted questions. Elena, what are you doing at the FBI? Is it true Marcus Thorne framed you? I ignored them all, my expression set like stone, my gaze fixed forward. I was no longer the frightened woman from the courthouse. I was here to burn an empire to the ground. Inside, I walked to the front desk, the data drive prepared by Sarah feeling cool and solid in my hand. A stern-faced duty agent met us in a small, sterile conference room. I'm here to file a formal criminal complaint against Marcus Thorne and Victoria Hastings, I stated, my voice clear and unwavering. For embezzlement and fraud. This drive contains irrefutable proof. I pushed it across the table. Everything you need is on there. We expect you'll find it compelling. The agent took the drive without a word, his face unreadable. But as we walked out, Back into the storm of cameras, the message had been sent. I was no longer a defendant. I was a cooperating witness. Back in the car, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. The public move was done. Now it was time for the private one. Ryan handed me my phone. He'll be screening calls from any number he doesn't recognize, I said, but he'll never block his own office. I dialed the main line to his company, a number I could recite in my sleep. Thorn Industries. This is Carol speaking. How may I direct your call? It was his executive secretary, a woman who had always been kind to me, who had cooed over my engagement ring just weeks ago. Carol, it's Elena Torres, I said calmly. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Elena, my goodness, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Carol. I just need you to deliver a message to Marcus for me. Are you able to do that? Yes, of course, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Tell him he has 48 hours to return every dollar he stole from those charities. Tell him the FBI is verifying my evidence as we speak, and that they will be freezing all his corporate and personal accounts at 9 a.m. Monday morning. The 48-hour deadline was a lie, a piece of psychological warfare designed to make him think he had the weekend to plan, to hide, to run. We both knew the real timeline was much, much shorter. Tell him the clock is ticking, I said, and hung up before she could reply. It didn't take 30 seconds. My phone rang, the screen flashing with Marcus's private number. I let it ring twice before answering, putting it on speaker for Ryan to hear. Elena? His voice was a strained, desperate version of its former self. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a thin veneer of feigned affection. Elena, darling, you're making a terrible mistake. We can fix this. The only mistake, I replied, my voice devoid of any emotion, was trusting you for 6 years. This isn't me. You have to believe me. It's Victoria. She got in over her head. I was just trying to protect her, to protect us. The pathetic excuse, the attempt to shift the blame he had so carefully placed on my shoulders, was laughable. You signed the papers, Marcus. You moved the money. You built the cage you're in now. The only person you were protecting was yourself. I could hear his breathing accelerate, the desperation curdling into panic and then into anger. You don't know what you're dealing with, he hissed. Victoria won't go down quietly. If you do this, she'll destroy us both. She has things on me, things you can't even imagine. It was a stunning admission. He was afraid of her. He, the master manipulator, was terrified of the viper he'd been keeping as a pet. A cold smile touched my lips. He was offering me a warning, but all I heard was an opportunity. Then we'll see who survives the fire, I said, and ended the call. Back in the war room, the atmosphere was electric. Ben, the tech analyst, was hunched over his screen, a triumphant look on his face. Got something, he said, not looking up. While you were out, I did a deep dive on Victoria, cross-referencing the Cayman account with any other offshore activity. Your call must have spooked Marcus because he just made a panicked transfer from a secondary account we hadn't found yet. On the main screen, he pulled up a new wire confirmation. It was a tuition payment for a prestigious, incredibly expensive boarding school in Gstaad, Switzerland. Who is he paying tuition for? Ryan asked, leaning forward. Not his kid, Ben said with a grin. The payment is for one Antoine Dubois. I did some digging. Antoine's mother is listed as one Victoria Dubois. He brought up a photo. It was her, younger, standing beside a handsome, dark-haired man, a small boy between them. It was a family portrait. Victoria Hastings' legal name is Victoria Dubois, Ben explained. She was married in France 10 years ago, and as far as I can tell, she never got a divorce. The revelation hit the room like a physical shockwave. Marcus hadn't just been paying off his mistress's gambling debts with money meant for dying children. He had been unwittingly funding her entire secret second life, bankrolling her estranged husband and her son in Switzerland. Victoria wasn't just a greedy partner in crime. She was a world-class con artist, and Marcus Thorne was her latest, biggest mark. This changed everything. This was the leverage that could break Marcus completely. The humiliation of being played so thoroughly would be a blow his ego could never withstand. This was our ace in the hole, the final kill shot we could deploy at the shareholder meeting if he somehow managed to weather the initial storm. Ryan looked at the screen, then at me, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across his face. "It just keeps getting better," he said, the sentiment both grim and deeply satisfying. He stood and walked to the whiteboard where he had a schedule written out. "The board convenes at 9 a.m. tomorrow for the shareholder meeting. Your evidence, combined with the news of your FBI visit, will be enough for them to invoke the morals clause and oust him." He uncapped a black marker and drew a second line on the timeline. "The FBI just called Jonathan. They verified the signatures on the primary transfers. They're fast-tracking the warrant." He wrote in bold letters next to the new line. "The Bureau executes their raid on Thorn Industries at 10 a.m. sharp." It was perfect, a two-pronged attack. His corporate life would be over at 9, his personal freedom would be over at 10. There was no escape. The trap was set, the bait had been taken. And in less than 18 hours, the jaws would snap shut. The boardroom was a cavern of polished wood and hushed tones, filled with the city's most powerful figures. On a massive screen at the front of the room, I watched a live feed from a microcamera on Jonathan's lapel. The shareholders and board members of Thorn Industries sat with stern, expectant faces. At the podium, Marcus was in his element. He was dressed in a pristine navy suit, his voice smooth and confident as he spoke of record-breaking projections and market dominance. He was utterly oblivious, a king on his throne, unaware that the castle walls were about to be breached. He thought he had until Monday. He thought I was a problem neutralized. Ryan stood beside me in our own command center, his eyes fixed on the feed. "He's walking directly into the line of fire," he murmured. "He truly believes he's untouchable." He gave me a brief, sharp nod. "It's time." Jonathan, already in the room, stood up. "Mr. Chairman, I apologize for the interruption, but I must move to allow a guest speaker to address the board on a matter of extreme fiduciary urgency that directly impacts every person in this room." A murmur of confusion rippled through the attendees. Before the chairman could object, I pushed open the heavy oak doors at the back of the boardroom and walked in. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Conversations ceased. Every head turned towards me. The shock was a palpable wave that rolled from the back of the room to the front, its crest breaking right at the podium where Marcus stood. His face, which a moment ago had been a mask of corporate confidence, went slack. The color drained from his cheeks, his mouth falling slightly open as he stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and pure horror. I walked down the central aisle with deliberate, measured steps, my heels clicking on the marble floor like the ticking of a clock counting down his final seconds. The shareholders parted before me as if I were a specter. I could feel their stares, their whispers, but my focus was entirely on Marcus. When I reached the front, I didn't stop at the guest lectern. I walked directly to the main podium, stopping beside him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his temple. I leaned into the microphone. "Good morning," I said, my voice amplified, carrying a deadly calm through the silent, cavernous room. "My name is Elena Torres. Many of you know me as the woman Mr. Thorne framed for embezzlement yesterday. I'm here today to talk about what he was trying to hide." With a click of the remote in my hand, the screen behind Marcus, which had displayed his cheerful profit charts, flickered and changed. It now showed the incorporation documents for V&M Holdings, the Cayman Islands Shell Company, and beside it, a single, stark number, $12 million. Chaos erupted. Shouts and angry questions flew from all corners of the room as the board members surged to their feet. "She's a convicted criminal!" Marcus finally found his voice, shouting into the microphone, trying to regain control. His voice was shrill, laced with panic. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "She has no standing here. This is a lie." I turned to face him, my own voice dropping, yet carrying with lethal precision over the sound system. "Says the man who framed his fiancée to protect his mistress's embezzlement." I clicked the remote again. The screen changed to a picture of a radiant, smiling Victoria Hastings. "He didn't want you to know that the woman he's been lavishing with gifts was the real thief." "That's preposterous," Marcus sputtered, his eyes darting frantically around the room, looking for an ally and finding only suspicion. "You have no proof I knew anything about Victoria's activities." He was trying to throw her to the wolves, to cut her loose to save his own skin. It was exactly what I expected. No proof? I asked softly. I clicked the remote one more time. The screen behind us split into two images. On the left was the logo for the Pediatric Cancer Research Fund. On the right was a wire transfer authorization for $1 million from their account to a laundering firm in Hong Kong. And at the bottom, magnified to fill the entire right side of the screen, was his unmistakable, arrogant signature. "Is this not your signature, Marcus?" I asked. A dead, profound silence fell over the room as every eye locked onto the damning evidence. He had nowhere left to run. He stared at the screen, his face a mask of primal fury and trapped desperation. He turned on me, his voice a venomous hiss. "This is extortion!" he snarled, abandoning all pretense of innocence. The crowd gasped, his outburst a tacit admission of guilt. "This," I replied, my voice as cold and hard as the marble floor, "is justice." His eyes blazed with impotent rage. He looked past me to the large security guards stationed by the doors, his last resort. "Security!" he bellowed, his voice cracking. "Get her out of here, now!" Two uniformed guards, both powerfully built men I recognized from the building's regular staff, began to move forward. But they didn't walk towards me. They walked straight to the podium and took up positions on either side of Marcus. He looked at them, his face a canvas of confusion. "What are you doing? I gave you an order." The lead guard looked at him with an expression of mild pity. "Sorry, Mr. Thorne. Our paychecks come from the new management now." Marcus's head whipped around to look at me and then past me to where Ryan Blackwood was now standing calmly in the doorway. Understanding, final and complete, dawned in his eyes. "You," he whispered, the single word filled with a career's worth of hatred. "They work for Ryan now," I explained, twisting the knife. "You missed 3 payrolls for the building's security contract. He was happy to pick it up." His gaze snapped back to me, the fury replaced by a chilling, hollow comprehension. "You planned this." A slow, genuine smile spread across my face for the first time. "Every beautiful second." The guards each took one of Marcus's arms. He didn't resist. The fight had gone out of him, leaving behind an empty shell. "My keycard," the lead guard said, his voice flat. Numbly, Marcus reached into his suit pocket and pulled out his executive keycard, the one that gave him access to every corner of his empire. The guard took it, held it up for a moment, and with a sharp, definitive crack, snapped the plastic card in half. The sound, though small, echoed through the silent boardroom like a gunshot, signaling the death of his reign. They turned him and began to escort him out, a deposed king being frog-marched from his own castle. He didn't look back. As the heavy doors closed behind him, a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees washed over me. Ryan strode to the front of the room, exuding an aura of calm and control amidst the chaos. He addressed the stunned chairman of the board. "Gentlemen, your company has a serious problem, but it's a problem that can be solved with competent leadership and full transparency." He slid a leather-bound portfolio across the mahogany table. "It wasn't for me, it was a formal proposal, a new CEO contract with his name on it. I'm prepared to take the helm, stabilize the stock, and cooperate fully with the federal investigation. Your company can survive this. Under my leadership, it will thrive." My revenge was complete. Ryan's takeover was just beginning. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of cathartic resolutions. An hour after the meeting, as I sat with Ryan in our war room watching the news channels explode with the story, my phone rang. It was Jonathan. "It's over, Elena," he said, his voice filled with professional satisfaction. "The DA is dropping all charges. They're filing the paperwork to have your conviction formally overturned and expunged from your record. It'll be like it never happened." Tears of relief, hot and real, finally streamed down my face. Just then, a breaking news alert flashed across the bottom of the television screen. FBI raids Thorne Industries headquarters. The 10 a.m. raid had gone off exactly as planned, but the final, perfect piece of news came an hour after that. Another alert, this one from an international source. Victoria Hastings, tipped off about the shareholder meeting disaster, had been detained by Swiss authorities at the Zurich airport, attempting to board a flight to a non-extradition country. Her double life was over. Marcus's empire had crumbled to dust. Victoria was in custody, and my name was cleared. Justice, it turned out, tasted far sweeter than I had ever imagined. That evening, long after the news crews had packed up and the last of the celebratory champagne had been drunk, I stood alone in the quiet of Ryan's office, watching the city lights flicker to life. The war was over. We had won. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk, displaying a blocked institutional number. My heart gave a single hard thud against my ribs. I knew who it was, I answered, putting the call on speaker. The silence on the other end was heavy, filled with a static of pure hatred. "Elena," he finally said. His voice was unrecognizable. The smooth, confident baritone was gone, scraped away by ruin, leaving behind a raw, gravelly rasp. It was the voice of a man with nothing left to lose. "This isn't over, Elena." It wasn't a plea or a threat in the traditional sense. It was a statement of fact from his new reality, a promise whispered from the bottom of a dark hole. For a fleeting second, a chill of the old fear tried to creep up my spine, but I smothered it instantly. He was a ghost, a bad memory, nothing more. "You're right, Marcus," I said, my voice calm and even. "It is over. You just haven't accepted it yet. Goodbye." I ended the call before he could utter another word, cutting off his connection to my world for good. The only power he had left was the power I gave him, and I was giving him nothing. 6 months later, I stood in that same penthouse, but it was no longer just Ryan's office. It was our home. The morning sun streamed through the windows, glinting off the simple, elegant diamond on my left hand. Ryan came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and handing me a cup of coffee. "Morning," he murmured, kissing my temple. "Morning," I smiled, leaning back against him. The ease between us was a quiet, sturdy thing, built not on lies and performance like my past, but on a foundation of mutual respect, brutal honesty, and a shared victory against impossible odds. On the large television screen mounted on the wall, the morning news was covering the final day of the Marcus Thorne fraud trial. There he was, a shadow of his former self in an ill-fitting suit, his face sallow and drawn. He looked older, broken. But the main event was the woman on the split screen, testifying via a live feed from a federal detention center. It was Victoria. She had taken a deal, of course. Her testimony was a masterclass in self-preservation. With cold, clinical precision, she laid out the entire $12 million scheme, every fake invoice, every offshore transfer. She answered her prosecutor's questions with a calm demeanor, painting Marcus as the obsessive, controlling mastermind and herself as a frightened woman trapped in his web. "He told me it was the only way we could be together," she said, dabbing at a dry eye with a tissue. "He said he would handle everything, that I just had to trust him." I watched Marcus's face as he listened to her betray him so completely. There was no rage, no shock, just a hollow, empty resignation. Their grand, destructive love story wasn't ending in a blaze of glory, but with a pathetic, whimpering whimper of mutual self-serving betrayal. They were two scorpions in a bottle, and they had finally stung each other to death. It was the perfect, pitiful end for them both. A special report followed her testimony. The anchor, with a broad, satisfied smile, announced that following Mr. Thorne's conviction, the last of the frozen assets had been liquidated and the full $12 million had been returned to their rightful recipients. There were interviews with the directors of the Pediatric Cancer Fund and the Veterans Charity, their faces alight with relief and gratitude. That, I realized, was the part that mattered most, not the downfall, but the restoration. Later that day, Ryan took me downtown, stopping in front of a newly renovated office building, one that used to house a subsidiary of Thorne Industries. Above the gleaming glass doors in bold silver letters was a new name, Torres Legal. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. "You bought the building," I whispered. "I bought his debt," Ryan corrected with a smile. "Which eventually became the building. Your conviction was overturned. The bar has already reinstated you. I thought you might need a place to work." He handed me a key card, not one to be snapped in half, but one that opened the door to my own future. It wasn't a gift to keep me by his side. It was a launching pad, an empire of my own built from the rubble of the man who tried to destroy me. I looked from the name on the building to the man beside me, and I never looked back. Standing there on the precipice of my new life, I thought about the fury that had sustained me in that cold holding cell. I had wanted revenge. I had wanted to see Marcus burn. But watching the news, seeing the money return to the children who needed it, seeing a corrupt company being rebuilt on an ethical foundation, and feeling the solid weight of the keycard to my own firm in my hand, I understood. Revenge is a fire that consumes you as much as your target. It's a fleeting, bitter satisfaction. But this was different. This was rebuilding. This was justice. And justice tastes sweeter than revenge ever could.